Hi, Variety Talk family. We are back. Welcome to the show. You're watching Variety Talk live from Las Vegas. I am your host, Linda Leak, and the faces have changed just slightly because why? We're honoring not only one person in his series, Mr. Larry Carroll, but it's Tuskegee Airman Day. And so we're very, very happy to have with us an original Tuskegee Airman, an individual who has served in the U.S. Army as a cadet at age 17. He was a Tuskegee College trainee. He was a part of the Tuskegee Aviation Cadet Training Program, and it goes on and on. So we're going to actually finish all of these credentials as we bring them on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Colonel George E. Hardy from the United States Air Force 99th Fighter Squadron. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I love long introductions. Welcome to the show,
Well,
Lieutenant.
thank you for
Appreciate
inviting
it so much. I love the decorations. I love the jacket. First of all, welcome to Las Vegas.
Well, glad to be here.
How was your flight in?
Flight was okay. I've been here many times before.
Oh, okay,
Las
great,
Vegas,
great.
so. But
And
it's much bigger today than when I started
I
coming
know
here.
it's amazing, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes,
How much it's growing. It's
It has
just
grown
crazy.
quite a bit, yeah.
And how's the convention with the
Convention's
with the Tuskegee
fine.
Airmen?
It's today was the first real start day, but I came in Tuesday because of meetings yesterday.
Well, great. Well, so glad to have you on with us. Thanks for coming. Larry, thanks for bringing them. I was just saying on the commercial break, I don't get really anxious. I do all of my interviews very conversational because that's the way I am. But there's only very few people that I kind of get a little anxiety ridden about. And the reason why I feel this way is because, and I hope I can say this without crying because I do this with the Buffalo Soldiers too. Your story is so important. The history, the legacy. There are so many people, just like you mentioned, Larry, that will approach you in the store, will approach you somewhere, and will say, oh, wow, the Tuskegee Airmen. But how much do they really know? And how important is it for them to know that, especially the younger people who are coming along who have absolutely no idea of what you have gone through, because you didn't have just one battlefield, you had two.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about the desegregation and the racism and all the conflicts and the challenges that you had to face as you were going through this.
Yeah.
So, but I want to give a few statistics, and Larry, I'm going to, just say thank you so much because you gave me some cheat notes, and they're really, really good cheat notes. One of the things that you said was that one of the important reasons why this congressional honor was given was because of the number of successes that were completed by the airmen and lack of loss of lives. So that's important. So with that being said, I want to just kind of give everybody a little background and information before we go into your interview, Lieutenant. And those statistics are this. There's over 16,000 people who were estimated to have been involved in this Tuskegee experiment. But there was actually over 14,632 who were documented. Now, 931 pilots graduated, and 685 with single engines and 246 with twin engines. All right, and so my point is, I'm just looking at the numbers that were involved, those who actually flew, those who fought, those who didn't fight. And it looks like half of the people that came in, it says here 2,500 people were pilot trainees at the Tuskegee Airfield, and 685 of those single-engine pilot graduates were deployed.
No, I correct that.
Okay, go right ahead.
600 some became single-engine pilots, but 355 actually went overseas.
Oh, okay, so
actually
still
went overseas
half
and
of
flew
those.
overseas. Yeah, 355.
Okay, so thank you for that. Thank you for that. So my point in speaking, and here's the big deal. Here's something that was just really big to me. 32 pilots were captured as POWs.
That's right.
and 84 Tuskegee Airmen were killed overseas.
Yes.
So that's what
We
I
lost,
kind of
yeah.
want to get into, because in the film, that was like the big deal at the end when they were showing exactly what were the losses at the end. And I guess there's kind of like a little conflict on that as far as that number is concerned. Is that correct?
Well, to me, the issue is here's some men who sacrificed literally everything for the idea of freedom. And yes, we lost people. Absolutely, war is hell. War is about succeeding and avoiding loss, but loss is inevitable. And those heroes whose remains were left over Germany and other parts of the Axis powers, we honor their memory. I think the equally interesting statistic is that of those 355 pilots who actually saw action over Germany and in World War II, only 13 remain today. And of course, Lieutenant Colonel Hardy is one of those. He just, you can tell the story, he just came back from an event in Wisconsin where he was representing the airmen and another lieutenant colonel was representing the airmen.
Colonel McGee.
Colonel McGee and Lieutenant Colonel Hardy. And Colonel McGee is the oldest survivor.
Colonel McGee is 98.
Wow.
98 December 7th of last year.
Oh my goodness.
And because I was 93 in June, he's the oldest
Oh my
surviving
goodness.
member, and I'm the youngest.
And you're the youngest
Yes, I'm the
surviving
youngest
member.
surviving
Oh, that
member.
is incredible.
The 13 that are left of the Red Tail pilots.
Oh my God!
Oh,
Because
yeah.
see, in '43 is when you actually went in at 17, correct?
Well, I passed the exam at 17 in March of 43, but I went in and turned 18 in June, and then I got orders to report in July. So I started in July of 43 in the service. I turned 18 in June of 43.
All right. So tell us the story, Colonel, because then again, once you got in, you were called into active duty, and you went to Biloxi, Mississippi, in July of 1943, and just tell us your story.
Well, I went to Biloxi, Mississippi for basic training
Okay.
and also processing, because to become a pilot, you have to go through testing and whatnot, psychological testing. So we did that at Biloxi. Then we went back to Tuskegee. We were high school graduates, and so they wanted to give us some college training. So they assigned us to the 320th College Training Detachment at Tuskegee Institute. And we got 3 months of college training in math and whatnot. Then we started as an aviation cadets in December 43 and graduated in September 44.
That is amazing, just right there, because I'm looking at the timeline. So we're talking from March of 1943. You accomplished all this, and
Yes,
by 1944, 1 year later, you're like ready. You're in it.
We're commissioned second lieutenant and wings of an Army
Wow.
pilot, say.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so during that time, what was your biggest challenge? Just from going from trying to pass the
Well,
test,
the
physical,
challenge
written?
was you were learning a lot, and you had to take it in and apply it properly, say. And actually, you say about 2,500 cadets started, 931 completed. It shows
Wow.
how many were eliminated.
Oh
say.
my goodness.
And so, but our class was 33 pilots. 32 pilots graduated from our class. 9 were twin engine, and 23 was single engine pilots. So
Now, and you know what I found interesting is that you actually signed up and you took the written and physical test in 43, but actually the desegregation didn't take place until years later.
Now, that's-
years later, that's right.
there were African Americans in the Air Force before the Air Force was the Air Force.
I mean, that's
At that
amazing
time,
to me.
it was the Army Air Corps. And so much because of what they accomplished during their time in service over in World War II, the United States Air Force became the first of the service organizations to desegregate.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I got out of the service in 46 and went back in 48. And in April, Air Force became a separate service in September 47. And then 7 months later, the Air Force announced it was going to desegregate. They announced nationally segregate. In July, President Truman signed an executive order telling the Army, Navy, and Air Force to submit their plans for desegregation. And that caused a stir across the country.
That was my next question. What was that like? I mean,
Well, it was the South was Democratic, and millions of Democrats in the South left the party and joined the States' Rights Party. And Strom Thurmond became their candidate for president against Truman. I guess Strom Thurmond won a couple of states in the South, but Truman eked out a victory and won the election in November of 48. Was it 48? The significance of that is, since he won, his executive order remained in effect. The other president could have killed it, but it remained in effect. So then in January of 49, Army, Navy, and Air Force submitted their plan for desegregation. And
Wow.
it went through, see.
wow.
And, and so they were approved by the Department of Defense in May of 1949. They were approved, and the Air Force was all ready to move out. By the end of June, they had deactivated the 332nd at Lockburn. And within weeks, all the Afro-Americans at Lockburn received orders to Air Force installations all around the world. So it was just that fast the Air Force is integrated.
So it was just like all by design, you know? Did you always have dreams of flying?
Oh, no, it came out during the war, you know.
Okay, so you just, oh, I see.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everybody
The war was
was
on,
drafted, I see.
War was on, say,
I
and
see.
everybody was going in, say.
Okay.
And so Pearl Harbor, remember Pearl Harbor? Everybody wanted to
Yes.
defend the country.
Yes,
you know.
yes.
It was our country too, see.
Oh yeah.
Well,
And I'm going to just digress a little bit here because I want to still get back into your resume a bit and speak a little bit about your graduation there in 44. And you graduated as a single engine pilot.
Yeah.
And that's when you were commissioned as second lieutenant in the
Second
United
lieutenant,
States
yes.
Army. So tell us about that.
Well, I was commissioned in September as a second lieutenant, and then we did additional training. We trained in a P-40, which is a fighter plane. It was a good fighter plane, but it was sort of obsolete by the time the war started, say. And then we flew in a P-47 from November to January of 45, learning combat tactics in that airplane, P-47. Then I drove an automobile for the first time, see.
Oh my goodness.
And then I went
You're old enough to
overseas.
drive.
Then I went overseas to fly in a P-51, see.
In Italy.
In Italy, yes. The 99 Fighter Squadron, see.
Okay, and that's the other thing because you were in several squadrons.
No, I was only in the 99.
Just the 99?
Overseas,
well,
yes.
Well, then help me understand because I'm just kind of like a little laywoman here. And I read a little bit about a couple squadrons, the 332nd and then 301.
I was a 99 Fighter Squadron, which was part of a 332nd Fighter Group.
Oh.
The fighter group had squadrons, 3 squadrons in it. And at one time it had 4 squadrons. But the group has those squadrons. I was in the 99th, we had the 100th, 301st, and the 302nd. So
Wow.
that's the squadrons we had. So.
And that gives us an idea about how huge these, how the participants were, or how big this army was as far as everybody that wanted to participate. And these were all African American.
It was all African American, and we had a squadron. You go on a mission. Normally, it's you have 4 flights of 12 airplanes. Of 16 airplanes. See, each flight has 4 airplanes, and you have 4 of those on a mission, probably. So 16 airplanes.
Wow.
Maybe a couple of spares.
Wow.
And we had 4 squadrons, so you might have 60 some airplanes going on a mission. See,
Oh my goodness.
which is a pretty good force. See.
Now, one point that the Red Tails emphasized in that movie, which was really big, was about how anxious everyone was to get out there and fly and be a part of fighting.
How were you guys received once you got to the battlefield?
How's that?
How were you received once you got to
What do
the
you
theater?
mean received?
What was there exchange? Was there conflict between white squadrons and black flyers? Were you isolated?
We had our own base. Most places had their own bases scattered around. And a lot of people didn't know who the Red Tails were initially. It's just that 15th Air Force told each squadron what to do on their tails. They're supposed to paint the rudder red. and the other squadron had the yellow tails and whatnot. But we painted the whole rear end of the airplane red, see. So it became known as the red tail, see.
That's how
And the
name-
idea of the rudder was you could see it from a distance.
Okay.
Well, that red tail, you can see it from even greater distance, see.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so it became the red tails.
The red tails. Oh my
So I flew as a
gosh.
wingman. I was still 19 when I was over there learning. So.
Oh, and I mean everything happened so fast.
It
Just
does
looking
happen
at
so
those
fast.
dates.
Yeah.
You, I mean, because you graduated as an engineer, is that correct?
Well, that was later. I got 2 engineering degrees in the service, see.
Yeah, that's
So
what I thought I
yeah.
saw. I mean, so we're not just talking little
Yeah.
tiddlywinks here. I'm talking to a very important man.
Well, I
sitting
got
next
out
to
in
me.
46 and went back in 48. I
Wow.
went to NYU for 1 year. When I went back in, I went into maintenance. So I learned maintenance so I wouldn't have a desk job someplace. I'd always be around airplanes, see, even if I wasn't flying, see. And that worked out well for me.
So you were like right there in the mix because we're talking about the Korean War, right? And then we're talking about World War.
But now that brings up something else, although in 49 integration took place, it didn't mean that everybody agreed with it, see. And I went to electronics school and graduated in August of 49. I was assigned to the 19th Bomb Group on island of Guam, B-29 outfit, 4-inch heavy bombers, see, as a maintenance officer. But as a pilot, I also got to fly the airplane. And I checked out in the airplane, and they eventually put me on a combat crew as a co-pilot in B-29. I still had my maintenance job, but I still flew. And in May of 1950, I got a new squadron commander who didn't agree with integration. He wouldn't speak to me except in the line of duty.
Wow.
And when the Korean War started, we started flying missions. We flew our first mission the 30th of June, 1950. The war started 25th of June. So we moved from Guam to Okinawa and started flying missions. And on the 12th of July, we were scheduled to fly our 7th mission, our crew. And I heard this voice say, "Hardy, get down out of the airplane." It was my squadron commander. He pulled me off the airplane and replaced me. He didn't want me flying in the airplane. It so happened I was the first B-29 shot down over Korea.
Oh my
Wow.
With my
goodness.
crew on it, see.
Oh.
And so most of my crew got back, but 2 were captured by the North Koreans. They had to bail out, see. And so
But
that was
racism
it.
saved your life that day.
Well, I don't know. The aircraft commander said if I had been there, he didn't think it would have happened. Because this new crew member, his co-pilot, he'd never flown with him before, see. And we had worked good as a team, see. And now he has this new fella given to him just before takeoff. They didn't have time to work out things, see. And it was my job is to take care of the gunners on the plane, to make sure they were ready at all times, see. Well, this new fella, they didn't have that thing worked out before they got on the airplane to take off, see. And that could have been a factor. The aircraft commander, he got back and he felt that was a factor, see.
Oh my God! Like Larry said, this is one time where racism played a very positive role. Well, one of the things that I'm sure everybody probably wonders is, I mean, you mentioned something in that piece that Larry narrated, and I want to tell everybody about that a little bit later on as well. But people probably wonder what were some of the other big things as a group that your group experienced, such as you mentioned something about being on a train and having to eat in another compartment.
Well, that was
and being separated from the other.
when I went into service in 43, I lived in Philadelphia, and when I got orders to report, I met 2 other fellows from Philadelphia, Afro-Americans who were going to Keystone Field, and we rode together. And they gave us Pullman tickets, so we had 2 berths on one side and 1 on the other. And we went to Cincinnati overnight. Everything was fine. From Cincinnati to L&N Railroad, going straight down to Mobile and over to New Orleans, we'll get off at Keystone. We still had our Pullman ticket, but when we went to the dining car, we had to sit behind this heavy curtain where they had a few tables behind there for Afro-Americans to sit, see. And we had to sit behind this curtain when we went south. And that was our first introduction to, you might say, real segregation in the South.
What were the actual, when you finally went out to fight right after everything was desegregated, were you also separated in your living quarters, or were you?
Well, in the South, remember, even after we went overseas and came back, the South had laws, segregation enforced by law. You could be arrested if you violated that law. Afro-Americans, movie theaters, there's a separate entrance for Afro-Americans and whites.
Thank you for that reminder. See, I even needed that. That reminder that this was still going on.
Water fountains, you had two, one for white and one for colored, say. And everything was separate. Blacks driving through the South, you couldn't stop at hotels because you couldn't stay at the same hotels with white and whatnot, or eat in restaurants, say. So it was an altogether different world, enforced by law in the South, say.
So while you're trying to do a job out there for the country, you're not able to live as a normal human being, and simultaneously you're asked to get out there and put your life.
That didn't really change until the 1960s.
Okay, tell us.
Until when the civil rights thing went into effect, say. And that's when that really changed. Those laws still hold effect up until then.
Wow.
So
we tend to forget that reality of
Yes.
of America, and there's a certain extent to which some of those old ways of thinking are being resurrected among certain areas of our population that are not comfortable with the idea that equality is a reality here.
And thank you for that, Larry, because after speaking to you a couple of weeks ago and hearing about your fight throughout the 60s and the 70s for equality, and really you faced a lot of things as well out there in the industry. It's great to see what you've had to go through, and then the lineage of what you've done to make a difference in the world. It's amazing. We're going to take a quick station break, everybody. You're watching WCOBM Variety Talk live from Las Vegas, and we're sitting in with Lieutenant Colonel George E. Hardy, United States Air Force, and of course, Mr. Larry Carroll. All right, we'll be back in a moment.
yes, segregation was a real